Steph Garcia for AthleticDirectorU, and I am so excited to be joined by Eddie Nuñez, Athletic Director at New Mexico. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to get into the nitty-gritty of alignment with campus. This is the stuff that people get really excited to talk about.
Yeah.
So tell me about the process of when you have an executive cabinet meeting with campus leaders. How do you prepare for that?
I think it starts in advance. One of the things that I've always prided myself on is when I go to a meeting, making sure that I properly prepare. And so those meetings are more important than ever because I'm going into a room trying to look at others as a peer. So if I want to make sure that those conversations go as we hope they do, making sure that everything that I need to know prior to showing up, I've done my homework basically. So for me, it's one of the more important meetings because again, college athletics change so much. And it's not about just what's happening in our world, it's what's happening on our campus. And I think this pandemic has showed it. So now more than ever, we have to be aligned with not just the president or the administration, it's with all campus leaders.
Who on your team helps you prepare for these things? And do you get the agenda in advance? Do you set the agenda ever? Give me the real details.
So I think there's always somebody in your staff that probably has an understanding of certain components of the meeting. So you have to make sure you do your due diligence, speaking to those individuals who might know a little bit more maybe about what's happening in the facility world. Maybe that might have a better understanding what's happening in development. So from my standpoint, it's really reaching out to my staff. I allow our staff to kind of cross that street and be able to have those relationships themselves because it's important to me. I can't be everywhere, so I hope they help me kind of bridge those gaps. So we do a good job trying to make sure that I have as much insight prior to the meetings as we can. But it's also having a great communication with the president's chief of staff, understanding what's on that agenda. If there's something, and I honestly, they do a great job. He asks in advance if there's anything we want to include. So from my standpoint, it's really making sure that if there is something that needs to be understood, I want everybody to understand. If we are going to communicate across the board and make sure that everybody understands what we're challenged with, I need to make sure that they have it all in front of them prior to it. So when they go and they ask the right questions and I can hopefully answer them back and vice versa. There's going to be things that I'm going to see on that agenda that might have to do with the campus. I need to understand it because our students are interacting with students all throughout campus. They're living on campus. I need to understand some of the dynamics of what's happening there as well.
How do you break down what's happening in college athletics, both at New Mexico, but also in the broader industry for campus leaders?
Well, we have to be understanding. I think it starts off with understanding that they have certain things that they're focused on themselves. So really kind of taking several steps back and me going in there and saying, this is what's happening today and how the landscape is changing, the transformation and that's going to go way over their head. So you really have to take steps back and I don't want to say dumb it down, but in an essence, really reduce it to a point where they can understand it much better. This is not their field. And so for me to be able to articulate why there's challenges, why we are in the crossroads we are right now with college athletics is important for me to do so by being able to say, okay, this is why it's happened. This is a little bit of the history, and this is the possible future. And so it's really, again, it goes back to preparation. For me, it's very important. Everything I do is to properly prepare. And so if I'm going in, I want to make sure I give them all the details that are especially pertinent to them, but also understand that their challenges are very similar to ours. So
let's go back to the very beginning. You're a new athletic director. How do you even go about establishing those relationships on the campus side?
Well, I think it starts off with being authentic. You can't be, if your expectation is to walk in there and just feel like you are above them or you're just going to meet them and keep moving on, then that's what you're going to receive. You're going to receive the same thing you give to them. And so for me, it's about being authentic and being who you are. I love to be able to interact. I love to engage. If I'm going to have a conversation with you, I want you to feel like I'm actually having a conversation with you. I want to know about you. I want to get to understand why your challenges are the challenges they are. What can we do to help each other out? Because at some point, there's going to be that time where I'm going to need their support and they're going to need mine. And if there's a relationship there, a true relationship, then it's going to help us get to where we need to. So I'm a big believer in trying to establish those relationships across as many on campus as I can. I want them to know that athletics is not just this group on the corner or on South Campus or wherever it is. It is truly an integral part. And that wasn't like that when I first arrived. So it was a lot of work to get to where we are today. I've had to really establish relationships. We had a huge turnover. Our president came in. There was a lot of people that have ultimately retired or there's been changes. And so it's establishing new relationships with new people that have come on board, but also those that have helped get the institution to where it is today. And how do we get it to where we all want it to be in the future?
True or false? College athletics is the front porch of a college or a university.
Well, again, I don't know who you want to ask that question to. I believe it is, but I believe it is with a certain level of accountability and respect. And again, I speak from experience of where I am today. When I arrived, there was a lot of things happening within the athletic department. I think everybody has seen many of the D1 ticker notes here and there that have come out through my time at New Mexico, but it really was, there was a lot of things happening. There was a lot of trust that had been burned through the years. And for me, it was important that we were maybe the front porch at one time. We lost that responsibility because we just didn't do what we were supposed to have done prior to me arriving there. And so when I arrived, that was a big emphasis for me to try to show everybody, if we do X, Y, and Z, if we take care of ourselves, if we're accountable, we hold others accountable, if we win, because winning helps. Mm-hmm. It also resonates with campus. The attitude around campus, the enrollment goes up. So there is a huge correlation in the two, and I've seen it firsthand at previous institutions that I've been a part of, winning national championships, winning success, what it does for the campus. So I am a strong believer in how important both those factors can be, but you have to be responsible. You have to understand that if you're going to be the front porch, the side porch, what porch you want to call it, I think it's important to understand that you have to do your job and you have to do it well. And you also have to make sure that everybody on campus understands what that vision is. What are you trying to do? So if you're going to be there, they want to know, okay, what is that vision? Where are you trying to take athletics and how does the whole campus fit into that?
Give me a little more about that.
Okay.
How can you and your staff go to the larger New Mexico community and
Mm-hmm.
say, we are all Lobos,
Yep.
and have them really feel that?
It's again, speaking from experience, I'm not from New Mexico. And so when I first arrived there, very similar to many communities, they want somebody who understands who they are, what they're about, what their state's about. And where I came from, Louisiana, for where I'd spent the previous 14 years, it was a very similar culture. It was a culture that, honestly, you had to engage, you had to understand who they were, why they did. I tell people all the time, from the first day that I arrived, that was my intention, to get to know them and let them get to know who I am. Mm-hmm. I am a very, again, outgoing person. I want to get to know you. I want you to understand, and I'm a straight shooter. So I think one of the things from a community, from a campus, is getting them to understand that who you are is who you are. It's not this fake game that you're going to walk in and say, I'm the AD and I should be treated a certain. No, that if you go in with that, you're going to get what you expect. And so my whole expectation is let them get to know who I am, and that I do want to get into the community. I do want them to understand I want to understand the culture. I want them to understand what we're trying to do. And the last thing I think that really truly resonates within kind of that whole equation, however you want to look at it, is they have to know that the decisions you're making are for the betterment of the university and the athletic department and the state. Every decision that I've made, it's the right decision for the University of New Mexico athletic department. If it's placing a coach, if it's making tough decisions, it's for the betterment of the athletic department and what's best for the state and for the university. People ask me all the time, there's decisions that I made with certain coaches, and I do what's right for the institution, because when I leave tomorrow, if I am hired, fired, whatever the decision is, if I'm no longer at the University of New Mexico, I want them to say that that decision that I made was the right one for that institution. And that lets me go to sleep at night and feel really good about what we did.
Well, let's go back through your trajectory of your career. At what point did you realize that alignment with campus, that those relationships, not just with the president and chancellor, but with other executive cabinet leaders, was important?
I think it started back when I was at Vanderbilt University as a director of events and facilities, and a gentleman by the name of David Williams, who ultimately was at the time vice chancellor, ultimately became the athletic director. He's a huge mentor to me before he passed away, and there's a lot of things that I do today based off what he kind of taught me or the guidance he gave me. And one of the first meetings that I had when I arrived was with him on campus, and he was overseeing numerous campus entities and areas and units, and to be able to sit down with him in campus talking about the greater picture than just athletics started resonating with me that I got to get myself out of that mindset that athletics is about athletics. It's about the bigger picture. Then ultimately going to LSU, being able to walk into the president's office, to the board of regents, and being able to present athletic projects or whatever was transpiring at the time. It was important that relationship had to be actually started, had to be cultivated, had to be ingrained, because if I'm walking into a board meeting and just presenting something, there's individuals in that group that are listening to professors, deans, and everything else, and they're going to say, well, who are you, why, and what are you about? So you have to establish relationships, but I also understood the importance of campus and athletics, and how if that relationship is strong, so many things are possible. So I take a lot of pride in my title of vice president, and it's not vice president of athletics, it's vice president / director of athletics. And the reason why is because that vice president title is what I can do for the university. And when I sit in the cabinet meeting or the president's leadership council, it is having conversations about the greater picture. And so those are things that I learned from David Williams back then, got heightened throughout my career. I just realized more and more as I went, sitting down with provosts, sitting down with deans, sitting down with development, how important every one of those individuals were, excuse me, and the aspect of where we were trying to go.
What's your quick hitter advice for up and coming administrators who maybe are completely intimidated by the fact that campus is, all these different units and all these different academic departments? How do we even get our hands around this?
I think the best advice that I can give young administrators, or honestly anyone who finds that challenge of trying to interact with campus leaders, is just go do it. Take the risk. What's the worst thing that can happen? You can get to know somebody. People throughout my career, many times that I've spoken, I've always say it's as simple as be a sponge. First of all, I want young administrators that are coming up to be willing to engage with anybody, be willing to embrace every aspect of the athletic department, but also campus. If again, don't shelter yourself and think that it's just about what's happening around you. So biggest advice I have for them is be a sponge. Go get to know people. Get outside of your comfort level, and get to know somebody that maybe you don't interact and maybe won't ever in your career again. But here's a side note. If someone does get to know a provost, and that provost becomes a president one day, there's an opportunity for you to be able to engage with somebody, maybe offer an opportunity that you didn't think about. So if you don't have those relationships, if you don't establish them now, and the same thing goes if you don't establish a relationship with an SWA, if you're a young administrator or a senior level, they might be an AD one day. They might take another job at another institution. Go make the best of that opportunity. So for me, it's really important to let them get out of their comfort level, go meet as many people. And again, the worst thing that could happen is you get to know somebody and you hopefully become good friends.
Well, this is great wisdom from Eddie Nuñez, Athletic Director and Vice President at the University of New Mexico. Thanks so much, Eddie.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.